Marvel Snap's newest card, Corvus Glaive, is one of the most interesting deck building conundrums I have seen in the entire game. The thing about Corvus is he doesn't look like he has a real home. As a 3/5, he has good stats, 100% he does. But his ability is two parts, and it's hard to make the two parts of his ability work together. Now, the first part of his ability discards two cards, and the second part of his ability gives you an additional energy. There are not a lot of decks that want that extra energy that also want to be discarding cards. This, for me, puts Corvus in a fairly limited position. You can either run him in a discard deck where you emphasize the discarding cards and you say, all right, Corvus is going to be like Hell Cow, maybe a little bit better, but those decks don't particularly need the energy because they're so built to be turn 6 Apocalypse Swarm type decks where you have like a Dracula, you have all this other stuff. You don't actually need the extra energy to do what your deck is trying to do. So Corvus ends up a little bit unused on the energy side. Now the alternative is you play him in a ramp deck and you throw Hela in the ramp deck, and that's pretty much what I did and what I assume pretty much every other streamer did. And it's like fine, but he's not moving the needle for the archetype, and the archetype itself isn't actually all that good. The only actual deck I could find that wanted Corvus Glaive any amount of the time is a Hela deck that has a significant appetite for risk, because that is a card that is extremely dangerous, and I think, most Hela decks really hate discarding their own Helas, and because of the way the deck is currently built, they don't actually have to. Adding Corvus only makes the deck less consistent when it finally actually hit a plateau of consistency. And because Hela is a deck that is really just looking to play the card Hela and discard whatever else, you aren't getting as much value out of the energy even there. So does Corvus make sense anywhere? I played this deck in High Infinite and I found it was mostly treading water. It's a fine use of Corvus, and if you happen to have picked up Corvus in your search for Gladiator, I think this is a shell that is probably going to end up being one of the best Corvus shells, but I do think that right out front, I should warn you, this is not worth buying this card for. I think Corvus Glaive is a card that will take an extended amount of time for people to figure out if it makes sense anywhere. Right now, my personal opinion is it doesn't really make sense anywhere, and I think that if it ends up making sense anywhere, that will be after it may have been changed, after new cards may have been released. I don't see it with this guy. And granted, I may be looking at this through whatever the opposite of rose-colored glasses is, because I didn't see it with this guy before he was released. He came out, he went in all the decks I thought he would go in, they weren't very good, and so now I still don't see it with him because nothing has happened to change my initial impression of this card as one that is fairly mediocre, because there's no deck that can really use all parts of the Buffalo. Now I should mention, Proxima Midnight as a 4/7 that is played whenever you discard it is a card that has some legitimate synergy with Corvus and maybe gives him more of a reason to, exist. But without that card being in any of these decks, I really don't feel like I can evaluate it. And I will say, I enjoyed in this deck the most when I could play Corvus into Hela. Like that, and that says a lot about whether this deck actually makes sense, because what that represented to me was I got to get all upside out of Corvus, and that's what he needs to be good. And the decks that can consistently generate situations where you are getting all upside out of Corvus, there really aren't any. And that is sort of his major issue. If there is a world where this guy can get upside 100% of the time, he's a good card. But right now, we're not in that world. And even after Proxima Midnight comes out, I don't really expect us to be. So let's talk about this deck, which I do think is the best Corvus deck right now, but I don't think it even really approaches, tier 2 status. It is a deck that you can play and you can probably do okay with, but there are going to be a lot of decks that are going to end up a little bit better. The major premise of this deck is pretty much that we have 3 of the 3 drops that enable us to play a 5-drop on turn 4, and because of the way the math works out, this makes us about 91% to have one of Electro, Wave, or Corvus Glaive when we are on turn 3. That's pretty good. I mean, that is pretty good. In turn, we sacrifice the ability to do literally anything on turns 1 and 2, which right now is a little better than it otherwise would be because there's really not a lot of good turn 1 and 2 scalers. We don't live in a world where our opponents are playing like an Angela that's going to be a 212 anymore. We don't have to worry about that, but it's still not something that you're very happy with. I will say, a lot of the time, I actually did feel that Electro and Wave were worse than Corvus because the deck felt so underpowered when I was just playing Electro into 5-drops that I actually needed the Corvus Hela stuff in order to just keep up with the metagame. Wave's utility is a little bit more limited than Electro's, but at the same time, it allows you to do things that are relatively solid. Like, you have the ability to wave into a 6, play a 5, play another 6. That's like a reasonable play you can make a lot of the time. And while it is likely a bit worse than the other two, being a 3-5 is legit, and that is a good thing to have when you just have some extra stats, especially when you do absolutely nothing on the first 2 turns of the game. Corvus Glaive himself in this deck is a card I would prefer playing on 3 to either of the other 2 because of the Hela high roll. Being able to play Corvus Glaive into Hela in a deck like this is like one of the only things that's actually good about it. Corvus, Hela, super legit. But unfortunately, what that tells me is I might be better off just taking this deck, getting rid of all the cards in it, and then just playing normal Hela. Because the best thing I can do with this deck is just play bad Hela. That's a really tough sell for this deck's longevity, in my opinion. I was struck by how much stronger this guy was with Hela in the deck than I thought he was. And yes, of course, I discarded Hela plenty of times. You'll probably see some of those at the end of the game, but at the end of the video. But this is actually legit. It's just the deck itself can't compete with some of the strongest stuff in the game in terms of power unless you're doing Hela stuff, which tells you maybe you should just be doing Hela stuff without Corvus. Sandman honestly feels like the number one problem in this deck. If you were trying to optimize it, I would sincerely consider just dropping Sandman. The issues Sandman has are myriad, right? You have Sandman that is a bad card into Loki because Loki just does tempo and then plays Loki, and then on the same turn you play Sandman, they end up getting all of your big cards, and then they play Dr. Doom and Odin, and they were already ahead, and it's just very, very awkward into Loki. Into decks like Annihilus, like, again, these are decks that can play, you know, Sentry into Annihilus. It's very hard for you to beat that. Into decks like Mirrors, you're basically never going to want to play this because it's just like what they want to do anyway. And the same goes for things like Hela, where it's like, oh, well, I'm not actually stopping you from doing anything you want to do. I found this guy to be legitimately bad. If you have a better option for this, I would encourage you to try. Ronan was actually pretty sick because he's just a really big 5. And you are definitely interested in really big 5s because of the way the wave game plans tend to work. You end up going like wave into a 6, into a 5, into a 6. You need your 5 to really matter, and that 5 is usually going to be Ronan if you really want something very, very large. Ronan ranges from like a 5, you know, he's usually in the range of like a 513 to like a 517 or something like that. He's just really damn big. And that is a very solid stat line for something that you're playing, hopefully on, you know, turn 4 or turn 5 after you've already cheated a bigger guy out on turn 4. This guy is kind of what you need in order to target some of these lanes. Vision in this deck is good, and I do think that there's going to be a certain segment, a certain type of player that overplays Vision because he feels like he leaves more options open. But one of the issues I had with Vision is that while he does feel like he leaves more options open, he sometimes ends up actually locking you out of winning the game because you just didn't put a big enough guy down on that turn. And I do think he's very good, but I think he's behind Ronan in terms of efficacy here. This guy is huge, and actually because of the way your deck works, you are usually able to be like, okay, here he is a minimum, you know, 17, maximum 22. You can look at your deck tracker, hopefully you have one, and figure out exactly how big he's going to be. And that is actually helpful, unlike in Thanos, where you're basically just guessing. As long as there's some stones left in there, you're just like, I don't know, he's going to be 15 plus maybe, but you can only really count on 15. In this deck, you can actually just be like, oh, I'm pretty sure I know exactly how big he's going to be, especially if you play him late. Electro, Sandman, Doom, Odin, I mean, that is the traditional game plan of a lot of these decks. And I think if anything is actually lacking in these decks, it is that, where it's like, you know, that's good, but it's not great. And if it was better, this deck could actually aim for the top and compete, As is, it is able to be in the game, but it is probably unfavored against a lot of the top decks because you're just not gonna win a lot when you're doing that low in terms of points. Literally the brightest spot in the deck is Hela. When you can Corvus Glaive into Hela, that is the strongest thing this deck can do, and it is indicative of how awkwardly positioned Corvus Glaive is, that the best card in it is a bad Hela. And I think that that is sort of, you know, this is the main reason why I'm not very high on this archetype, because if this is my favorite thing to do, if this is what needs to happen for this deck to keep up with the metagame, there's more reliable ways of doing that. There is a bit of a hidden nut draw in this deck, and it is Corvus Glaive, then you play Hela, and then you play Odin on the lane with Corvus Glaive and Hela in it, which triggers Corvus Glaive, then Hela again. You can do this. It's like hidden good, but also it's like not as good as you think, and doesn't happen as much as you think, and gets Eliath a lot. Like it's a play though, and you should be aware of it. This is not just a, oh, I'm gonna make sure that I Dr. Doom and Odin. Like, it's not just that. You also have the Corvus, Hela, Odin game plan. It is actually a thing. It's just like, you know, a lot of the time when you did Corvus, Hela, that first one's usually enough. That's usually pretty solid. The second one is cool, but like that first one probably got the job done if it was halfway decent. This guy is the other shining star of the deck. I think so much of this deck succeeding is just like, you get to be a Turbo Magneto deck, you get to be a Corvus Hela deck, and just doing that is enough. Like, it puts you in an awkward situation because Thanos is a better Turbo Magneto deck, and Hela is obviously a better Corvus, non-Corvus Hela deck. It's just a better Hela deck. So you end up being like, not necessarily like the worst of both worlds, but there are decks that are better than you at doing the things that you do, which is never a good spot to be in. And that's why I'm sort of making this video with what I would consider just like an enormous grain of salt. I don't know if I've been super clear on this. I feel like I've been implying it the whole time, but Corvus Glaive is not worth buying if you want to play this deck, because this deck isn't good enough to justify the purchase. Giganto is just very large, good Hela target. Sometimes it gets leeched and people actually die to that. Like, this is a deck that relies a lot on, not necessarily surprise, but for a deck that's so telegraphed, it actually ends up having a lot of situations where the final turn is like a will they, won't they 50-50. And there are a lot of those games when you play this deck. And because there are so many of those games, you end up liking just having multiple options. Now, do keep in mind, if you do plan on playing Giganto, I mean, you got to think about it kind of the whole game, because he can only go in one location unless they do leech him. But yeah, like, this is a card that has the keyword of being very, very big, and he and Ronan are usually your biggest dudes that you can play. And yes, you know, Magneto usually is a comparably sized guy, but A, he's smaller, and B, he's normally pulling stuff over, so Magneto gameplay is usually just trying to be sneaky about it, whereas this guy is like, no, I'm just a really big guy, I'm gonna play a really big guy, it's this, Blob, and Ronan. And that is an important thing to have access to, is the ability to just try to overload a Shang-Chi by being like, I've got this, I've got Blob, I've got Ronan, we're just going super, super big, we're just playing giant dudes, and we're gonna say, you cannot Shang-Chi everywhere. You can play like that. It's, again, like, I keep coming back to this, where the deck is okay. It's not like this is a deck that is like totally unplayable. It's good, fine, I would say, but it's not the kind of deck that justifies the use of 6,000 tokens. It's not the kind of deck that justifies the use of caches. All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed that breakdown of Corvus Glaive ramp and why it's in such an awkward position. I honestly can tell you I would not open for Corvus Glaive at this time. Obviously, I can't speak to any like potential future buffs. I know there were like people who were like, I wouldn't open for Gladiator, and then they got rid of America Chavez and they buffed Gladiator, and now they're feeling really bad about that, which coincidentally, Gladiator is in these caches. I will say that I think a cautious stance is warranted here, where someone's gonna need to really break the game with a Corvus deck for me to buy it, I think. Right now, my advice to you would be to, you know, take a step, don't worry about it. You do not need to buy Corvus Glaive right now. I'll probably do a different video tomorrow where I highlight all the decks people are playing Corvus Glaive in, but if there really aren't too many of them, I might not do that. We'll see. That said, this is clearly the one that I think you can actually expect to be plausible at high level gameplay. I'm not sure that I can say that about the rest of them. So we're gonna jump into some gameplay here. I had a fairly I went like 40% with this, but I was like keeping even in cubes. Like it's like this is what I mean when I say like it's almost there, right? Like it's like I don't know if I can really recommend this, and I don't recommend you buy for it, but if you happen to have Corvus, this is not as far off as it may seem. That's sort of my take on it. So we're going to jump into that gameplay. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Cam Best. You've been phenomenal. I will see you in the next one. Roll beats our shit in? Let's do it, baby! Woohoo! Easy game, easy life. Yes, he discarded hella. Okay, what about me? Wait, no! Wait, what the fuck? That's the same discards. That's fucking illegal. Every streamer plays same deck with Corvus? Blame Corvus. Do we Odin or do we Blob here? I'll Odin. Coolio! We played against it. We beat it for 8 cubes. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing this as like a plausible deck. Okay, we do have Corvus Hella here, which is actually the most plausible line in here, is having Corvus and having Hella. Now, I can't wait for the Corvus to discard my Hella. That is inevitable, I'm sure. But this is like actually easily just my best play. Is just it doesn't discard Hella, right? This is like the only thing in the deck I feel actually good about. Which of course means it's discarding Hella, right? Like, okay. Zabu Magic means I'm getting run over by Living Tribunal. I'm never going to be playing 2 cards, right? With Corvus, I could get to 8 on 9. So the only way I'll ever be playing 2 cards is with this Electro, anyway. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. It's like, you just try the deck with Hella without the Corvus, and it makes way more sense, no? If I win this game, it's pretty much entirely due to Magento, would be my thought process. Is there a number they can put Nimrod's power at to make him good? Jesus Christ, I don't know. Why no Magento left? I want to wait one more turn and actually clog it. Mag left? Why would I mag left as opposed to right? Like, I'm actually interested. Why would I mag left? Chat. 4, 3, 3. I'm clogging either lane. I think the real reason is like Iron Man. Ooh! Immense pain. Hella Odin the Doom. Hella left and pray Odin goes left. I was thinking it might actually be Gigantor left. But yeah, they probably already left. Boy, this guy's in the springtime of life right now. Yeah, so far on Corvus Gaming, we have learned Wong loses to Magneto. See, this is bad because they're just doing what I'm doing, but better. Like a lot better. Fuck TVA. Oh. Now I kind of regret that. That's real bad. Huh. Huh. I was thinking about that, Cam Worst. I mean, we lose to like a Shang-Chi, yeah? Nice! We got him! Nice hella, dude! Nice hella, dude! Magneto exists. Everything else, dog shit. And so far, I've had Corvus Glaive into Hela, but it has consistently discarded my Hela. Does that mean I'm not going to try it again? No, I'm trying that shit again. I'm trying that shit again right now. But it's probably not going to work. Holy shit. Wait, theirs is so much better. What the fuck? What the fuck? I do get to go Corvus into Hela into Odin, right? Yeah, I do snap. I do snap. I get Corvus into Hela into Odin. The one time I ever get to do this shit. And the vision prevents us from losing the combo, right? Oh, shit. Okay, thank God. The Magneto stayed there. That was horrifying. Am I still dead? No, we don't. The space doesn't matter. We have the vision. It's fine. The issue is, like, we still just lose to cards, right? Odin mid, doesn't it double proc? Which cards we lose to? Are Hela cards going over here? They can't play 2 cards, send it. Yeah, they can. We can't play 2 cards. We just need one of these to go to Mojo World. This is why I didn't want to make the fucking play, chat. What if this card gets buffed right after its spotlight ends? Hey, possible. This card is the best card released in like 4 months. That is so not true. It's kind of unbelievable. Isn't it more possible the more it sucks? I just don't understand what buff you could give this guy to make it not suck. You feel? I don't know what you're supposed to do to make it not suck. Yeah, give it 20 power. Yeah, like, give it targeted discard or some shit like that. This is one of the greedier versions of this deck. Is it? We're gonna play everyone's favorite game. Where's the shit going? But since we hell at a Doctor Doom, actually okay. Is Blob bigger than Ronin here? It's like 17 most of the time. 17 to 20. Yeah, okay. They snap me. Why? They Odin? They Odin? They Shang-Chi? What's happening here? We beat Odin by hellaing middle. We beat Shang-Chi by hellaing right. Or left. The question is actually, is it Odin or is it a big guy? Because if it's a big guy like middle or something, we die, right? Is this Odin or is this a big guy? It's a big guy, but I think we're going to win. Oh! Oh, it's leader? That's what you were cooking? Oh, man. Oh, was leader was being cooked up there? Ugh. The old boomer snapping to get casserole. Yeah, that was a play. Fucking leader. I eventually went with the left play because it was like, okay, if they play a big guy, we probably win the tiebreaker just on the shit. If they play a big guy, we probably win it. Like, oh, no, what I went was I went the left play because if they played an Odin, we probably win the tiebreaker because we're further ahead on the right than they are on the left. And we end up in a tiebreaker situation on the middle. And that also plays around them playing a big guy because it wins the left lane, right? Actually had the ability to fully play around it. And so we did that. Okay. I immediately dislike where this is going. I don't want to do double here because I do want to play Sandman against this deck, I think. I no longer want to play Sandman. They played the demons. That was kind of the only reason to play Sandman in the first place. Okay. Does he have a like a little remove the power guy here? Is there like a rug pull happening here? Goliath ties mid, and then we win the tiebreaker. So I don't think it's a Goliath. What? Did you have Prio? I'm in it for dodging Shang mid. I didn't have Prio. I was reading Odin, bad snap. You snapped and I was just like, I don't know what the fuck that means. I saw the snap and I was just like, I got nothing. I don't know what that means. I hate it. I was in pain. I was like, oh fuck. I have absolutely no idea what the fuck goes on there. Also, we lose because of Gamma Lab. Hell yeah. We're actually just gonna lose to that. Actually just insanely dead to the Gamma Lab. Alright, not gonna lie, I don't get what just happened there. I don't understand what's going on, but I'm scared. How the fuck are we in this? I don't know. Haha! We win it by 2! Woo! We did it! Let's go!